Lecture number 4. The structure of the facial skull bones: upper jaw, lower jaw, palatine, lacrimal, nasal, zygomatic bones. Vomer, inferior nasal concha, hyoid bone. Purpose of studying the topic: to gain knowledge about separate bones of the facial skull, the details of these bones, its topography, the boundaries of the facial skull bones. List of the literature.
Today we are going to discuss about skull and bones of facial skull. Facial skull. These bones form face of human, orbit, nasal cavity, and oral cavity. So these bones are paired and some bones not paired. First, we are going to discuss about maxilla. This is maxilla. It's paired bone, maxilla. So here we can see separately this bone. It has four processes: frontal process, zygomatic process, alveolar process, and palatine process. And it has four surfaces: superior surface, anterior surface, temporal surface, and nasal surface. Nasal surface. So, superior surface forms inferior wall of orbit, and it has infraorbital groove and it continues as infraorbital foramen and goes out here infraorbital foramen. Between orbital surface and anterior surface there is infraorbital margin. On anterior surface we can see infraorbital foramen, fossa canina, and nasal notch. Next, temporal surface. Temporal surface takes part in formation of infratemporal fossa and pterygopalatine fossa, and it has alveolar foramen to supply upper teeth for blood supply and nervous supply. Also, it has great palatine groove to form great palatine canal. Great palatine groove. Next, nasal surface. It forms a lateral wall of nasal cavity, and it has maxilla hiatus. Because this hiatus connects maxilla sinus with nasal cavity. This is maxillar sinus. Or here we can see maxilla sinus inside of maxilla bone. So now we have discussed about surfaces. Now some information about processes. Frontal process. Frontal process, or here we can see frontal process. It connects frontal bone, nasal part of frontal bone. It has anterior lacrimal crest here, and on medial surface it has ethmoid crest here. Next, zygomatic process. Zygomatic process connects with zygomatic bone. Here we can see this is zygomatic process, and it connects zygomatic bone. Next, alveolar process. Alveolar process has an arch form, arch shape, and it has 8 dental alveolus for fixation of 8 teeth. Next, palatine process. Palatine process origins from nasal surface. It has horizontal position. In medial edge it has nasal crest, and it forms hard palatine together with palatine bone. So it was information about maxilla. Next bone is palatine bone. Here, from the basis of skull, we can see it here. This is part of palatine bone. Or we can see it here. Partially, it's here. It's located here, behind of maxilla. Let's see on the picture. This blue color is palatine bone. Palatine bone has 2 plates and 3 processes. Here we can see we can say not plates, laminas, 2 laminas. Lamina perpendicularis and lamina horizontalis. Horizontal plate and perpendicular plate. Horizontal plate takes part in formation of hard palatine, and it connects with palatine process of maxilla. And perpendicular plate forms lateral wall of nasal cavity. It has 3 processes. Pyramidal process connects with pterygoid process of sphenate bone. And on upper edge, 2 processes. Orbital process take part in formation of the orbit. And sphenate process connects with the body of sphenate bone. Between these processes, sphenopalatine foramen. Between these processes and sphenate bone. Palatine foramen. So it was information about palatine bone. Next bone, Vomer. Vomer is trapezoid-shaped bone. It's not paired bone, only single. It's located between sphenate bone, hard palatine, and ethmoidal bone. And it forms nasal septum. It's a thin bone. It has 2 alar. We can see it here. This is Vomer, but not fully. And by 2 alars, it connects body of sphenate bone. It's Vomer. Next, nasal bone. There are 2 nasal bones, small bones, quadrangular shape, right, left. its upper edge connects nasal part of frontal bone, middle edges connect to each other, and lateral edge connects with frontal process of maxilla. And these two nasal bones and two maxilla nasal notches forms opening of nasal cavity, external opening of nasal cavity. Next bone, mandible. It's only one movable bone of the skull because it can move to provide chewing process. For example, here we can see during speaking, chewing, etc. this bone movable. It's not paired, of course, single bone. It has two main parts: body and ramus. Two ramus. Body has basis. It's thick part of this body, and alveolar part with dental alveoles for 16 teeth, for fixation of 16 teeth. Outside we can see mental protuberance and mental tubercles. Two mental tubercles. Protuberance and tubercles. Behind of tubercles we can see mental foramen, exit place of arteries, blood vessels and nerves. Inside of the body we can see spina mentalis, digastric fossa for fixation of muscles. Behind of digastric fossa, sublingual fossa for sublingual gland. Here we can see linear mylohyoid line for fixation of the same muscle, mylohyoid line. Behind of below this line, submandibular fossa for submandibular gland. On external surface there is oblique line between mental foramen and coronoid process, oblique line. Now about ramus. Between ramus and body there is angle, mental angle. Ramus has two processes: condylar process and coronoid process. Between them mental notch. Coronoid process has a head and neck. Coronoid process takes part in formation of temporomandibular joint. This is temporomandibular joint between temporal bone and mandible. Temporomandibular joint. On external surface in angle region there is masseter tuberosity. For fixation of masseter muscle. Inside, in angle region, pterygoid tuberosity for fixation of medial pterygoid muscle. On condyle process, there is also pterygoid fossa for fixation of lateral pterygoid muscle. And also important to say about this foramen, mandibular foramen. Mandibular foramen continues inside as mandibular canal and goes out here, as we said before, through mental foramen, because inside there are nerves and vessels to supply lower teeth. So let's repeat. Mandible foramen, inside mandible canal, and exit place mental foramen. Mental foramen. So it was information about mandible. And next bone, let's see on the picture. Hyoid bone. This small bone, hyoid bone. Hyoid bone doesn't connect other bones. It is suspended by ligaments and muscles only. It's located between mandible and larynx. Between mandible and larynx in the neck region. But we discuss about it because it's part of the skull. This bone has a body and two horns, lesser horn and greater horn. This bone is very important because it's a place of fixation of neck muscles that take part in swallowing process, speaking process, etc. That is why it's very important bone. So now we have discussed all information about one else please. Lacrimal bone. Lacrimal bone, it's a small bone, last one, small bone. It's located here, but a little bit damaged here, but it's place of lacrimal bone. Lacrimal bone, it's very thin bone. That is why it's very often it's maybe damaged, like here, and it takes part in formation of medial wall of orbit. Medial wall of orbit. It has posterior lacrimal crest. Here we can see posterior lacrimal crest. And lacrimal sulcus. Lacrimal sulcus. Lacrimal sulcus, together with the same sulcus of maxilla, form lacrimal sac. Here we can see. This is lacrimal sac. Space for lacrimal sac presence. Let's see here this lacrimal bone. Here we can see orbit, and this purple color, lacrimal bone. It's located between frontal bone, maxilla, ethmoid orbital plate of ethmoid bone, and frontal bone, and forms medial wall of orbit. So it's lacrimal bone. So now thank you for your attention. We have discussed about facial skull. It's very important because these bones form face of human, orbit, nasal cavity and oral cavity. So thank you for your attention.